We're going to get ready to go with our webinar today. And the webinar today is on custom properties and rules. And I'll spend, 10, 15 minutes or so here just running through the basic functionality within Amity. But at any time, you can answer questions, do some chats, and I'm definitely going to leave plenty of time to answer those as well. So thanks everybody for hopping on. We appreciate it. So here's the Amity software. And again, for context, navigating Amity, you go up and down this column. And today we're going to focus down here in settings. Okay, so I'm in settings. And again, this is where you configure Amity, right? This is where you can define templates for processes like onboarding and adoption that can get called by a rule, right? This is where you can define task types that can get called by a rule. This is where you can define email templates that, once again, can get called by a rule, right? And playbooks are high-touch workflows, stage processes. Tasks obviously assign, something for the CSM to do. And then email is where you're able to leverage, the in-app email automation. Okay. And then as I go down here to the rules engine, this is where you configure the workflow automation in Amity. And rules in Amity can address a wide variety of things. For example, you could create an early warning trigger rule, like a KPI is down 25% week over week, and you want to be notified. NPS is trending down. You can configure upsell triggers. So you've locked on to a certain key thing that's important to you, we'll alert you. You can configure milestones along a value path. Look at goals that you'd like people should be achieving as they continue with your solution, and you can detect whether or not they're achieving goals. Configure at-risk follow-up. Again, KPIs. You can trigger workflow around usage, trigger workflow around life cycle. So for example, if an account is renewing within 90 days and you want to send out an email letting the account know, you can configure a playbook, assign yourself a task. Onboarding. If a new closed won occurred in a CRM, you could automatically start the onboarding processes. Engagement cadence. For example, you could have tiered your accounts. You may have 500 accounts, of which 100 are tier 1. Then you divided the rest by tier 2 and tier 3, and you want to configure specific rules for how often you engage with tier 1s versus tier 3s. Configure the degree of touch. You can configure rules around you've introduced a new feature, and you want to use the Amity email automation to send out a success story, an introduction to that feature. And then at the same point in time, you want to monitor adoption of the feature. And if it hasn't hit a certain percent, continue to drive the campaign to get the new feature, adopted. So there's just a few examples. So let me drill in and start to explain, how you configure rules. And in Amity, the add button is on the right-hand side. Consistently, you can just look for it. And so I'm going to hit add here. And let me just do a couple of standard rules to show you how straightforward it is. So I'll set up an onboarding rule. So I'm going to set up an onboarding rule. And within the rules engine, there's two big parts. Conditions and actions. And think of conditions like the if. If this is occurring, and think of the actions like the then. So if something is occurring, then do the following. So I'll start here with the if. And in Amity, you can use data triggers, insights into the data, and then you can filter inside the insight and or the triggers to sort of narrow and create a rifle shot for how you want this rule to go. So I'll start up here with triggers. And so, for example, there's a list box here, and you can see that these are 3 important triggers in Amity. When a new account is created, for example, a closed one from a CRM, a new subscription is created, a new ticket is created. But following the thread of a new account, so when a new account is created, and again, there are options here, created, assigned to, health changes, life cycle changes from onboarding to adoption, priority has changed. You had the priority as low and suddenly it went up to high because something's going on. You change the risk. So the CSM can grade risk in Amity, and if it was low before, then suddenly it gets adjusted up. Risk changes can drive workflow. Size of an account changes, type of an account changes. So all sorts of possibilities here, but I'll follow the when an account is created. So there's the trigger. So that's the if, and then under the then in actions, once again, there are options. And just like I was saying a bit earlier, you have the options to add a playbook, which would call a template that you've set up here. So if I follow this thread, I'm going to add a playbook. Up pops the option here, playbook. And again, if I drill in, all the templates that are configured within Amity will show in this list box. So I would have the option to pick the playbook that is most applicable to the rule that I'm working on. And in this case, because it's onboarding, I'm going to pick the onboarding playbook. Okay, so up here, I've named my rule. You can put in whatever description you'd like to put in. And in this case, I'm using a data trigger when a new account is created. And under actions, I'm adding a playbook. Now, actions in Amity can be layered, and oftentimes they are. So for example, I'm going to hit add. So the original action that I put in, add a playbook, is still there. But at the same point in time, and remember, this is a brand new account, I could add in other actions. So for example, I could email the account. So I'm going to email the customer. And in this case, I'm going to import a template. So here within Amity email templates, there's a welcome template that has been set up. Just like there was an onboarding template set up in playbooks that defined the stages and the tasks and time. Okay, so I've already called the onboarding playbook. Now I'm going to call the welcome email template. So I go here and I hit import template, and all the template options that are set up are going to show here. Okay, so various types, as you can see. Again, in the email templates in Amity, you can create templates around virtually anything that Amity is reacting to in the data, like a goal, create campaigns, key feature, renewals, just like some of the things I was talking about before. But down here, here's the welcome template. I'm going to check here. I'm going to import. Okay, so now the welcome template is configured in here, and that would configure a second action. So first action is add a playbook, create an onboarding playbook. That would show up here in the work view for the CSM. Second action is a welcome email is going out to the customer. And now I can add a third action, where again, I'm just going to hit the list box. And I'm going to pick this option, which is where I want to email the customer success team, okay, that they've got a new account. Okay, and you follow the same approach. where again, I'm going to import a template. And this time, the templates that have been created that are focused internally to the team, like CSM, new account notice, or an upsell alert, for example. But in this case, I'm going to pick this one, and I'm going to import. You know, hi, CSM, you have a new account. So within this one rule, onboarding, I used a trigger, and then I created 3 actions. Send an email to the CS team, send a welcome email out to the account, and create a playbook so you can start your process. And again, under actions, I use the email team. I could also add an alert, which would go out within Amity to let the CSM know that they've got a new account. Okay, so it's very, very flexible in the way that you can configure rules. Now I'm going to add a filter to this rule. So say, for example, you have a different onboarding process for a tier 1, a larger account. You could also use this as an example if you've got a different process for different types of solutions, you know, that you offer. But in this case, I'm going to follow the tier 1 option. So now I'm going to filter in a little bit more. I'm still going to rely on a trigger, but now I'm going to add a filter. I'm going to hit add, and now there's a list box. And in this list box, basically just notice that it's alphabetized, okay, fully alphabetized. And what this list contains is all the custom properties, both standard and ones that we've set up specific to you, and we put them all in one list here. And as I pan down, you can see that really these properties, you know, are reflective of all sorts of different situations, right? Number of active users, who's the CSM assignee, benchmarking, did you return a call, churn, CRM owner, right? All sorts of different things go into this list box. It's a global list box, which you can access to filter through, you know, your accounts. And again, it's alphabetized, so it's easy to access. So in this case, I know that I'm looking for a tier 1 rule, a large account rule. So I pick tier from that list box. And then again, here are the options that have been set up in Amity, right? Enterprise accounts, tier 1, tier 2, 3. So I'm going to select tier 1. So now this new rule will get called when a new account is created and when it's a tier 1 account. And then within Amity, you could have similar actions like email yourself, email a welcome. But down here in playbooks, I picked an onboarding playbook. I could create another playbook, a new business tier 1 playbook that would call a different process than the one that I had before when it didn't relate just to tier 1s. So you can create separate playbooks that you can call based on the rule that you're configuring up above. Okay. So again, added filters. Now I'm going to get out of this, okay, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to hit another add, and this time I'm going to do an engagement rule. Okay, again, name it whatever you'd like to name it, and instead of using triggers, this time I'm going to use insights. I'm going to hit add, hit this, and up pop all the insights that have been set up in Amity. So this list here is coming from here. All the insights that have been created here. So insights in Amity get configured into health levels, Insights get configured here, and insights can also be configured within a rule to drive workflow. So in this case, I'll pick an engagement rule. I'll pick an engagement insight, 30 days, no contact. Okay. And then down in actions, really it's just the same thing that I explained before, is you can decide what to do. So if, for example, on no engagement, once again, I wanted to add a filter, like for example, MRR is greater than or equal to $1,000 a month. This could also be ARR, by the way. And then I can also, I can add multiple filters. So say, for example, I want this rule to relate to accounts that are adopting with me. They're in their first 90 days after launch, for example. So I'm locking onto this data insight. I'm filtering in accounts over 1,000, life cycle stage, adoption. And then again, in actions, I can say that for these accounts, I want to add a task, make a call. Okay? But I could change this rule around and pick a rule for smaller accounts, less than or equal to 250. And I could get rid of the life cycle stage. I'm just gonna remove it. And I could say for these accounts, I want to go low touch. And I'm going to email out. And in that case, I'm going to pull from a template here, and that email will automatically go out. So that's just one example of how you can use data insights. But again, I could have just as easily created a low activity usage workflow, a KPI insight driven workflow, subscription, power user workflow, NPS driven workflow. Right? So I could have picked any one of these things like usage low activity, and then just like we're locking on to engagements, keeping track of emails, telephone calls, chats, we're also obviously monitoring activity. So that if there hasn't been any recent activity, for example, no activity in 7 days, and again, you can filter, you can drive action. This could be a key feature. And the actions can be, again, leverage the email automation to send out a success story, decide when you want to get involved and make a call. And oftentimes people will create different filters, as I've been showing you. Okay, so that's a high-level overview into the rules engine. And then one other thing I wanted to make sure that I mentioned is in that list box where I said it contained standard and custom properties. Okay, and I'll just actually go back here. Right, this list box right here, standard and custom properties. So where those properties get set are here. So up at the top, I just clicked accounts, and custom properties at the account level are right here. And again, oftentimes these custom properties are configured through automation. So generally through the APIs, if you're sending over usage, activity, key features, whatever you're doing, KPIs, whatever you're doing, we can configure those custom properties in Amity and then do value-added calculations on top of them, comparing, a KPI this week versus the average for the past month, for example. If you've had two times the normal support tickets opened in this last week versus the last 3 months. So we're going to take in standard information, and then we can create custom properties and do value-added analytics on top of that data. And then once these properties are created, they can be called in the rules engine, right? So they're created, and then once again, I can go back in here, and I can drive a rule by that custom property that I created. Okay, so that's custom properties. And we have custom properties at the account level, and we also have custom properties at the user level. So one of the really nice things about Amity is that you can look at and do health scoring and workflow at the account and also at the user level. Same approach here. Okay, so I just wanted to let everybody know that it's 1:21, so there's 9 minutes left. And if there happen to be any questions, now would be a great time to start to ask. And I'm just going to watch for questions or chats. And if I don't see anything pop up, there's a little Q&A button there. If I don't see anything pop up, I'm going to just go back in and do a bit more on the rules engine. So don't be shy. Just continue to ask, just ask some questions. But until I see them, I'm going to go back in and do a little bit more work, on the rules engine. Okay. So I'm going to go down. Actually, while I'm in custom properties, I'll just show you a little bit of an example of how this works. So again, these custom properties, they get configured through automation, but just to go under the hood a little bit, once again, I'm going to hit the add on the right-hand side, and you can define a custom property, right? You're going to add the description, and custom property types can take, on all types of custom properties can be brought into Amity that affect, all sorts of different things. And then you can decide if there's certain formulas that we're going to be calculating. So again, this is the value that's created around custom properties. And again, it's highly flexible. I saw the question coming there. You can use custom properties to compare trends in data. You can use custom properties to look at a value path. You can use custom properties to look at goals that you've got for users. And are they achieving those goals? Are they consuming things in a way that you expect if you have a consumption model? So for example, I've got a question here. Okay, so this question's from Don. And how many steps do people normally put in? So how many steps do people put into rules? How many is too many, too complicated? Okay, great. Thanks very much. So let me answer that question. Right here. So when I'm configuring a rule, sorry, I got to go down here to rules. I apologize. So I don't know if there's a general rule of thumb, but one thing that we've definitely noticed is definitely as the complexity of your business grows and as the number of accounts that you have to manage increases, the rules engine and also views in Amity, will increasingly, help you through automation and just helping you to feel like, you have control of your accounts, that you know what's going on, that nothing is slipping through the cracks, right? There's nothing that will drive you more nuts than that. So the number of filters that get created, if you've got 5,000 accounts, of which 1,000 are high touch, so a pretty good amount of high touch customers, right? So for example, if I go here to tier, right, I could have lots of larger customers, 800 of them. That's still a big sample size to pick from. And so then based on that, I'm going to add another filter because I really need to narrow in more to really sort of narrow my field of view to make sure I'm doing the job right. So I could narrow in by life cycle stage, which is not unusual, right? Understand if account is about to enter, the renewal window, for example. It's like if I wanted to add that filter, once again, I'm just hitting this list, right? And I would go up here and pick renewal. And I can configure something where this account is renewing 90 days in the future. It's a tier 1. They're entering the renewal life cycle stage. That could be one filter. They're in renewal. Or I could get rid of that filter and say, you know what, I want this rule to apply to tier 1 accounts that are coming into the renewal window, and you want to assign yourself an action, add a task, give them a call, right? Just as an example. And you could further add granularity and say, all right, I know this account is coming up, into the renewal window, and I want to also look at the last time, that I engaged, with this account. Was it 30 days ago, 15 days ago? So you could start to create some cadence around account engagement, just as an example. So in answer to your question, the more accounts you have, you may often want to filter in further to create rules that are more granular, again, depending upon, how focused you are. If you are very high touch, you especially may want to create rules to make sure that you don't miss the touch points. Oftentimes, CS teams have a tendency to focus on the larger accounts, and you may want to use email automation to reach out and say, hi, we know you're getting ready to renew. I wanted to check in. Do you have any questions? So you could leverage the email automation to reach out, to the tier 3 accounts. So thanks for the question. I appreciate it. And I'm just seeing if there happen to be any other questions that anybody happens to have. Okay, so I'm going to do one more. Again, please feel free. Got the time. I'm going to do one more quick thing on rules, and then we'll end the webinar. So again, you can name rules, on all sorts of different things. Things that can be especially useful, in the rules engine is, for example, I may want to look at, I may want to lock on to the fact that an account, the onboarding is running too long. Now, this insight is coming from playbooks within Amity because we can see that it's running too long. And in this case, I've talked about creating plays and tasks, but you can also auto tag an account. You can pick from the tags in Amity, right? So you can create automatic tags that will just show up at the account level, like in your dashboard, for example, and it will just automatically show up, if the onboarding starts to run late. If, for example, there's been, no activity. So again, auto tags make a lot of sense, and you can do these things both at the account and at the user perspective. You can do the same thing with alerts. Okay, we've got another question. Okay, so question is, how did you create the insight onboarding late if it's linked to a playbook? Got it. Okay, just 1 second. So that insight came from here. So in the Insights tab in Amity, all the insights that are set up within Amity are here. Okay, so all the insights are set up here. And so, for example, here's where I got that from. So there's an onboarding late insight that is set up. And basically what this insight does is it's looking into the playbook. So for example, if I go up here to playbooks, I can tell, because I see the green everywhere, the SL, if you only see green, it means that you're hitting the SLA timeframes that you established in the playbook template. But in this case, Johnson & Johnson, you're running 3 days late getting out of training. So Amity can lock on to the fact that you're late here, and it can throw an insight. So it would throw an insight to you at the account tab, right, where you would see onboarding late. Amity would automatically adjust the health up to warn you. And then at the same point in time, you can drive workflow to say, if the onboarding is late, also alert me, auto tag, whatever you'd like to do among the actions that you've got there. So that's where that came from. So insights get driven by data. Insights can can influence health, and they can also influence workflow, right? So there were the insights. I was down here explaining the workflow engine and rules. And just to finish the thread, if I go in here to health, you can see how there are insights listed here. So for example, a usage low activity insight. If I go over here, I can say low activity, I want to be warned. And then suddenly that usage low activity insight is showing up in the warning level profile right alongside, onboarding late and just other things that you wanted Amity to automatically lock onto. We'll lock onto that, show you the health, adjust priority, and you can drive workflow based on that. So I'm going to end the webinar. We're 1 minute over. Whoops. And I'm going to end the webinar, and I want to say thank you very much for attending today. We appreciate it, and have a great day. Feel free to reach out to your coach if you have any questions. We do have a playbook video, and this webinar is also being recorded that explains playbooks and the rules engine in detail. Please feel free to ask about that as well. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Goodbye.